Hey, I'm Nick with Ultimate QM, and today I'm going to walk you through setting up an ARC race car. So what you're going to need to set up your car is the setup plates from Ultimate QM and the bars, an L tool and the 3D printed blocks, two 90-degree squares, and two 9/16 wrenches and a tape measure. So first thing, you're going to install the setup plates onto the car and the rods through. And then you're going to put the car, all four corners, at 1.5 inches flat. And you're going to take your L tool and put it between the left rear radius rods and the frame to set your left to right distance of the rear axle. And to adjust it, you're going to come over here to the Jacob's ladder where it's hooked to the bird cage, unpin it. In this case, I want to make it a little longer, so I'm going to loosen up this heim. Now shorten it a little bit. Put it back through. Now I got the right distance. The L tool sits flat against the rod, the frame, and the table. Make sure this heim stays straight up and down and is not crooked when you tighten it. And then after I'm done with that, we're going to switch from 1.5 inches flat to the ride heights that the setup sheet says. Currently I'm setting it up to 1.5 inches and inch on the left. So I'm going to put 1-inch ride height blocks on the left side. So after you get the car down at the right ride heights, the next step is going to be to set the timing of the bird cages. So do that on the right rear. You're going to put the square on this flat spot on the caliper here and lengthen and shorten these rods to get it so it's perpendicular to the table. So on the ARC cars, the arrow on the ARC logo here, if you spin it towards that arrow, it's always going to lengthen the rod. If you spin away, it's going to shorten it. And then on the left side, you want to put the square flat against the back of the bird cage. And it's tipped back right now, so I'm going to shorten this top rod and lengthen the lower one until it sits flat against the square. And then once the timing's set on both sides, you can check the distance front and back of it. So you're going to put a square against the back of the frame and against the back of the axle as far out to the left as you can get it, and measure that. And the measurement should be from the back of this square to the back of this square. It should be 4.5. And I need to shorten it up a little bit. So I'm going to shorten both of these rods evenly. Now it measures 4.5. I'm going to come back and check my timing again. So that's all good. So now I'll come over on the right side and check the distance as far out to the right as I can get these. It should also be 4.5. So I need to shorten that a little bit. It's also okay if you can't get the 90-degree square onto the axle. You can also just measure straight from the back of the axle to the front of this square. So I'm going to need to shorten up these rods a little bit to get the right measurement. Same thing, spin them evenly. And then after that's set, same thing, come back and check the timing. It's still good. And then come back over and check the distance on the left side again. It's also still good, so then I can tighten all my jam nuts down. And now we move to the front of the car, and the first thing we're going to do is install the steering lock. After the steering lock's installed, you're going to take your 90-degree squares and place them on the inside of the plates touching the plate and the rod. And you're gonna use those squares to set the toe. And when you adjust the steering rods, you're only gonna loosen the outside jam nut on each. You don't have to loosen the side that goes to the linear rod end. You can leave that tight. There should just be like a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch of thread showing on the linear rod end side, but you don't have to loosen that up, just loosen the outside jam nut. And after you've set the toe with the 90-degree squares, you can check the wheelbase. When you measure the wheelbase, take the measurement from the back of the rear bar to the back of the front bar, not to the front side of this bar. And it should be 46 3/4 on this car because it's a rookie car. And it is on both sides. So after the toe is set on both sides and the wheelbase is at 46 3/4 on both sides, then you can come and check on, I'll start with the left side, check the caster and the camber. So you want the caster on the left is going to be 0. And right now it sits at 1/4, 0.25. So you're going to roll, it's a 1/4 rolled back. So you're going to lengthen this rod and shorten this rod. That's also going to mess with your wheelbase and your toe. So as you're checking the caster, you also want to be checking your wheelbase and your toe. So by rolling that forward, it also rolled my wheelbase forward. So I gotta shorten up the wheelbase a little bit by lengthening this rod. But that also rolls my caster forward. So now I gotta roll my caster back. So now that measures 0. The wheelbase is 46 3/4, and the toe is right. It's much easier on these cars if you adjust all 3 things together than it is to try to do it one at a time. After you're done with that, you can come and check the camber. Make sure you put the angle finder right there on the setup plate. And the setup sheet says 2.5, so that's what I'm going to set it to. So to adjust that, you want to take these 2 rods and adjust them evenly. And if you spin them evenly, it shouldn't adjust the wheelbase or the caster, but it will affect the toe. So there's 2.5 right there. And I'll come back and check my toe. And I'll double check the wheelbase and the caster as well. Make sure they didn't move. And they're still good. So then I can lock down the left side and move on to the right and do the same thing. Okay, then I'm going to come over to this side, and the wheelbase and the toe should still be set from earlier. And I'm going to check the caster. And it needs a little more. So I'm going to lengthen this one and shorten this one. Double check my wheelbase and my toe. And once that's all set, I'll come and I'll check my camber, which the set sheet says 4. So I'll spin both these rods evenly in to give it a little more. There's 4. After I set the right side, I'll come back over and double check the left side to make sure it's all square still. Which it is. Okay, and then after that, the last step is going to be checking the toe, because the squares are not 100% accurate. They're really close, but it's always best to check it with the tape measure at the end. So I'm gonna measure the front, and it measures 35 and 15/16. And I'm gonna come around to the back. And it measures the same, so it's good. So this car's all square, and I can lock all the jam nuts down. So to tighten down the jam nuts on the art car, on the right front, you're going to start by tightening down the one closest to the chassis. And then you're going to put one wrench on the rod, and you want to angle the heim as far that way as it can be without touching it. You don't want it actually hitting the mount, but you want it close. And then you're going to hold it there. Tighten the outside jam nut. On this one, same thing. You're going to tighten down the inside jam nut first, and then you're going to angle it about right there. Hold it there. Tighten down the outside jam nut. Here, same thing, you're gonna tighten the inside one, angle it to about there. Tighten it down. That's just so when the right front travels down, the heims don't bind up on the mount. If you have them angled in, the heims will hit and it will bind up. Then on the left side, when you're setting it, you do the same thing. You tighten the front one down, then hold it. But you're gonna do the opposite. You wanna tip them in towards the mount, towards the inside. Tighten this back one down. Same on that one, tip them in, and here as well. Tip it in and hold it. That's because the left front will never, we set the art cars at with the driver in the car, we have them at ride heights. So when you actually get on track, the left side won't compress, it will actually extend. It will droop more, so you don't want them to bind up when it drops. Okay, so when you're setting the hole for the right rear rods, just refer to your setup sheet. The setup sheet for this car wanted it in hole 3, so that's where I have it. But if you look at it, these are actually on a radius, so you can adjust that after you square the car. It won't hurt the wheelbase or anything. Okay, so that was the basics of squaring an art car. After that, it should be ready to go up on the scales, and you should be race ready.